What's going on, my fellow residents? Normally I begin my videos with some kind of meme, but I'm using this intro to point out that I now have a Patreon. I made a video about it earlier which goes more in detail about it, but the link to that video and the Patreon are in the description, and the Patreon link will be available for my further videos as well, so make sure to check those out. Just wanted to make that a quick note. On to the video. Bakugan. Kinda already talked about everything in terms of Bakugan in my last video on it, so I guess I'll talk about my experience with the show since I didn't do that too much. I ended up watching some of season 1, but a lot of my experience with Bakugan was actually the third season, Gundalian Invaders. Unfortunately, the game I'm talking about today is based on the second season, New Vestroia, which I had the second least amount of experience with, but I do know that it introduced a new battle system that the rest of the series would use, as well as Bakugan traps. But anyways, just like the first season, New Vestroia got a game based off of it. It was also the only other console game to come out until the new series happened, and Champions of Vestroia was very recently released, which from what I've seen, it's bad. Really bad. So maybe there's a reason that there weren't any more Bakugan console games for a while. Well, I'll be finding out the potential reason for that today as I look at Bakugan Defenders of the Core. So just like the last game, there is a lot to talk about, so hold on to your seats. In this game, there is another created character that you play as, though it's not the same one from the first game, as this one is very proficient with electronics. If anything, you could say it's another universe. I still made him look like Ren though, in case my attachment to Gundalian Invaders wasn't obvious enough. Anyways, Dan and Ren are training together in the Bakugan Interspace, which is basically virtual reality. Suddenly, the Interspace starts to collapse due to a power overload. Dan manages to get out, but Ren is stuck inside. He later on wakes up in Marucho's plane and discovers that Dan and Marucho are battling Spectra, who uses a Vexos crystal to—
They take away the ability to brawl.
What? That is so— Let's just move on. I'll save my opinions for later. Ren helps them alongside Drago. Once in safety, Ren finds out that Dan and Marucho don't know who he is. On Marucho's plane, the group figures out that the malfunction in the Interspace broke a hole in the space-time continuum, sending Ren to another dimension, which explains why Dan and Marucho don't know who he is, and why the crystals don't affect him. Since the Interspace brought Ren here, it can take him back, but it needs an IC chip. Conveniently, Mira, another member of their resistance team, is on a mission to get one, but communication with her has been lost. This leads to Ren having to save multiple members of the resistance and their Bakugan, as well as destroy the Vexos crystals around the world. Ren also encounters Abyss, the spirit of the Earth's core, who assists him in defeating the Vexos. However, the others can't see her, again because Ren is from another dimension. At the end of the game, Spectra takes the energy from the Earth's core and becomes almost unstoppable, but Ren destroys Abyss as per her request to defeat Spectra. With the Vexos defeated, everyone regains their ability to brawl, and Ren returns back home to his dimension, where Dan and Marucho were worried about him. So let's get the big elephant in the room out of the way early. The no brawling beam sounded like the dumbest idea I've ever heard when it came out of Spectra's mouth. How does taking away someone's ability to brawl even work? Maybe if it was tied to their gauntlets, which is needed for battle, then that'd be fine. But the gauntlets aren't mentioned once in the game at all, and it seems to affect the person rather than anything else, so I'm not giving that to them. Maybe it's an alternate dimension thing, which makes it seem like a cop-out instead of being a somewhat clever way of saying, this doesn't follow the storyline of the show. But this also brings up the main character does everything trope that I brought up last time. Before, other characters at least had a chance at doing something and could be a viable threat, but here, every single one of your allies literally can't do anything, and when they do end up doing something, it's usually detrimental. For instance, Mira. I hate Mira in this. At one point, Spectra demands that we hand over Drago if he wins, which he ends up doing so, because he forms Maxis Helios. Mira gives him Drago, expecting a secret deal that she made with Spectra, which was to quit the Vexos and to go back to being her brother if he got Drago, to be followed through. Which, of course, that doesn't end up happening. Then immediately after this, feeling guilty, she tries to get Drago back, even though she is not a threat at all because she can't brawl and can potentially get herself kidnapped. After being kidnapped earlier.
Are you dumb, stupid, or dumb?
She's aggravating. Also, Ace gets upset at us for wanting to go back home. At least the others are fine because they don't do anything, but it's because they don't do anything that I also don't care about them either. Like for example, Shun kinda just shows up at some point in the story, and that's about it. He doesn't have any form of notable moment throughout the rest of the game, other than him just showing up. So characters are either hateable, or don't do anything to really have any feelings for. This story is just not enjoyable almost the whole way through because of these things. Its cliches work against it completely, and most characters are actually insufferable, and it's not even just story reasons for that either. When it comes to this game's art style, personally, I like the first game better. This game isn't bad, but the previous one had some charm to it, especially when it came to the character models. I don't feel that as much with this game. Again, it's not bad. In fact, the Bakugan are pretty detailed. I just prefer the other game. I'll admit though that the real world areas having at least some ties to the Bakugan elements is nice, but it's not as much of a spectacle as the arenas were. And before anyone asks, I played both games on Wii, so the quality difference shouldn't be that big. The music is also in the same case as the art style. It still feels like music you'd hear in Bakugan, and the exploration songs are my favorite in the game. The battle music is also good, but it's way more noticeable outside of playing the game, because in battle, characters never shut up. They constantly make remarks about what's going on, and a few of them are useful, like the hologram towers going down or when a landmark is under attack, but anything else is just about playing the game, and it is spewed out at you constantly. Thank you, Mira. I know that shooting is useful in battle. Shun, I realize ability cards are useful. Stop telling me. I know I can block enemies, Dan. Baron, telling me that I can break out of combos while I'm getting slugged in the face is only going to make me more angry at you. Stop talking. They also sometimes talk in battle as if they are participating in them, which, as we already established, they literally can't. Now, you can mute voices, but that doesn't stop them from appearing on screen and having it told to you anyways. Speaking of them talking, the voice actors are mostly not too good. Some voices I actually just straight up can't stand, such as Shadow and Baron, but then there's ones where the quality of realism in their voice acting is bad, especially the player.
Maxis Drago? How is that even possible?
Thank you for agreeing to help.
No problem. Well, wait!
The last game may have had a few moments, but this game consistently has bad moments. As for the other characters, none of them have their original voice actors with no known reason, which is surprising since at least a majority of voices in the last game were the same from the show. Not only that, but multiple characters are voiced by the same people, which isn't inherently a bad thing. In fact, the last game did this too, but it was to a smaller degree. At least it's not noticeable in this game either. The only ones that are good quality-wise are Marucho and some other characters done by two people, because they are voiced by the same people that did Clementine, Kenny, and Mojo Jojo. Why is Bakugan's voice acting so weird? At the beginning of the game, you create your Bakugan brawler. Again, I made him look like my avatar in the last game who looks like Ren, so we'll gloss over that. During the story mode, your playable character travels the world and explores the areas he travels to. When roaming around, he has to avoid guards, robots, and spotlights set up by the Vexos. One way of doing so is by throwing Bakugan at objects and walls to distract guards. It can also be used to hit objects that are out of reach, such as switches, which will open up other areas. As you progress through the game, your character invents two tools: goggles and a stealth tool. The goggles help you see things that are hidden with infrared, while the stealth tool turns you invisible. These can only be used for a certain amount of time before needing to be recharged at these ring station things that kinda just exist. There are two things that you can find in these areas: chests, which contain figurines of Bakugan, or Vexos passes, which allow you to get away with getting caught once, and core energy, which is used during preparation for battles. When preparing for battle, you are able to select the Bakugan you want to use, 2 ability cards to bring into the battle, and upgrade your selected Bakugan with core energy. You can also spend core energy on hologram towers. These towers are used to attract enemies to them instead of landmarks, and heals you when standing in them. Now we're on to the fights, where you must take care of several objectives in set areas. And often one is that you'll have to protect the landmark of the area you're in from the attacking Bakugan. The other is to destroy all opposing Bakugan and destroy the Vexos crystals. Oh, and you also have to make sure you don't die, because that's pretty important. Fighting Bakugan means you'll need to utilize a mixture of weak and strong melee combos, as well as normal and charged projectiles to attack. Dealing damage causes your ability cards to build up, and once they are built up, you can use them. You're also able to jump, dash, and or fly around depending on the Bakugan, but it does take stamina to do so. If your stamina is too low, you won't be able to dash or fly around. When destroying buildings, you might end up finding a power-up which can increase your attack power, defense, or unleash an attack all across the battlefield temporarily. After every battle, you'll be ranked on your combo, remaining health, and how many buildings you destroyed, assuming there are even buildings nearby. This results in you getting more core energy. On Marucho's plane, you can change your clothes, go to the interspace to replay missions, and look at your collection of Bakugan, ability cards, statues, and cutscenes. There are also some multiplayer game modes. Duel has 2 people fight each other for a few rounds, and whoever is standing last or has the most amount of health after some time passes wins. Free for All has up to 4 people battle against each other for points, which are obtained by landing hits and killing Bakugan. Destruction Battle is another point game where 2 opponents compete to break Vexos crystals as much as possible, and whoever has the most points by the end wins. The type of Bakugan matters a lot for battles. There's the attribute thing where a Bakugan is strong against one element while weak against another one, meaning they'll do more damage to elements it's strong against and take more damage from elements it's weak against. This also applies to hologram towers, so if you plan poorly, things can be very difficult without it needing to. There was one time where the difference between success and failure was what attribute one of my hologram towers I had was, on top of having to fight 2 enemies, then 3 right after that, where one of them could shoot both the hologram towers and the landmark at once, and that was a bit much, but otherwise, it's manageable. The Bakugan themselves, aside from the attributes, matter as well. The possible attacks and projectiles are diverse. Granted, the differences for attacks are literally one or the other, but other things affect battle as well. For instance, there's one Bakugan, Altair, that floats along the ground so it's not affected by lava, which normally would lower your health since you're standing in it. For Altair, the only way to get hit by lava is by getting smacked into it. Then there's flying or jumping, which can matter a lot for navigating a map depending on which one it is. Like Bakugan that fly have an easier time in Egypt because they can avoid the ground that slows you down, while Bakugan with multiple jumps can leap to higher places easier in China. Now, I'll admit exploration is not that interesting at first as there is barely a branching path, but it does get better later on with more stuff to find, including some machines where you have to find the codes to use them. It's still really easy to get everything, especially given that the codes are right next to the machines, but it can still be fun. You are rewarded for going the extra mile both in exploration and combat, as you'll always get more core energy for doing better in missions, which are useful for upgrades in hologram towers as they help out a bunch, and you get more ability cards for characters when finding chests. There's also a New Game Plus, which carries over all of your core energy, upgrades, and tools, and allows you to use a Bakugan that the villains have in the story mode. Plus, you can find more Bakugan traps which are used to unlock Max's Helios, the final boss of the game. And from what I noticed, there's no tutorial stuff or characters screaming at you the entire time, so that makes it even more enjoyable. Most of the multiplayer modes are fun to play too. Dueling does play just about how you would expect it to, but you are able to figure out certain techniques with characters and how to properly combo break, but free-for-all is actually very fun. It's constant chaotic action and there's never a dull moment, unless you manage to hide from everyone, but at that point you'd end up losing due to how the point system works. Getting caught is actually laughable at best, and it's all because of how half of your mouse tool arsenal interacts with obstacles. The Bakugan throwing is fine and doesn't work on anything that isn't a guard. The goggles don't really affect that much, they operate how they should. The stealth tool, however, makes getting caught an absolute joke on anything that moves. It lets you not get caught by spotlights, which is fine, but then there's bumping into a guard or robot. When that happens, you end up getting stunned for a little bit and it takes you out of invisibility, but even with that, whatever caught you will move straight through you as if nothing happened. Like, come on, that should be an automatic catch. And that little mystery tool that help us out later are the Vexos passes, which completely erase the fear of getting caught by anything. Yes, they are one-time uses, but because of how many you get from chests and talking to people, with the fact that there's no limit to how many you can get, at some point it feels faster to just go straight through people than to wait and avoid them. By the way, I will say that at first I thought people just giving Vexos passes to a random person and expecting them to do something was odd, especially when it seems like they themselves could use it more. But then I realized that I'm traveling with some of the top brawlers of Earth, and I also look like a main character compared to the citizens, so that makes sense in the end. But yeah, getting caught is actually a joke. The the created character has just barely more default options for clothing than before. You get to travel the world and you don't get any more clothes. I guess it doesn't matter too much because you also aren't able to use them outside of story mode, to my knowledge anyways, but it still kinda sucks. Every Bakugan only has 4 ability cards and most of them have the same 3 cards, being some form of enhanced projectile, a rush attack, and a shield that deflects projectiles. I kinda wish every Bakugan had a larger variety of cards at their disposal, especially given the fair amount of diversity the last game gave. Maybe a way of doing that is when you do well enough on missions, you'll unlock additional ability cards. Thankfully, you can still have a couple combinations, but again, the lack of cards is surprising. Destruction Battle is kinda boring. I thought it'd be more like a Rampage type of game mode where you destroy as many buildings as you can, but there only being one single point to go after at a time is pretty boring. But it's a secondary game mode and there are the other 2 that I mentioned before that you can settle with. The inner space could have been used for harder versions of missions to give more content than single player, and it would also make sense since it's virtual reality. There is the New Game Plus, which kinda tones the need for that down, but I do think that that would be something cool and give extra value to the game. I'll admit, on my first playthrough, this game wasn't too enjoyable for me. All I could focus on was the characters I didn't like or even care about yelling at me the entire time, and the cliche-filled and irritating story after every battle only made the experience more and more draining, causing me to not enjoy the game as a whole very much. But when I played the game more after the story mode and a bit of the New Game Plus, I enjoyed it a lot more because I was able to focus more on the gameplay and see the good things that came from it because I was able to mostly ignore the aspects I didn't like. Basically, I'm saying the game is great when I'm ignoring the bad stuff, which is unfortunately not the point of these reviews. I have to take the bad with the good. And certain aspects were so bad to me that I almost didn't give the gameplay its due respect. The fact that I had to outright ignore the bad to even find the good at all really sucks. As I've always said before, gameplay matters the most when it comes to games, which is why I would hold this game over the first one. But when I add everything together, it's not by that much. What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. So when it came to me watching Bakugan when I was younger, for a long time I actually thought that Gundalian Invaders was the second season because I just didn't know about New Vestroia for some reason. I'm not even sure why that's the case, but it is what it is. But that's finally Bakugan Defenders of the Core done, because I know that a fair amount of people have been asking about that since the last game, which was actually a fair while ago. So I'm glad to finally get to this game, especially since I also played this one a fair amount in my childhood and enjoyed it from what I remember. But also, like the last game, I ended up not liking it as much this time around. Now, I am aware that there are Bakugan games on DS. I'm not sure if I'll ever do those, if I'll be honest. I guess if the demand is high enough, I could, but as of right now, I don't really see the need for that too much. But once again, in case you guys skipped the little intro section, I did end up getting a Patreon, and the details of that Patreon are in a video that I posted before, but that video will be in the description as well as the link to the actual Patreon itself, so make sure you guys check that out. Now, you don't have to become a patron, that's just a thing you can do if you want to, and you will get benefits out of it if you end up doing so. But again, you don't have to. But if you have not already, especially with the fact that I brought it up twice, make sure you guys go down to the description below because that's where all of my social medias are located. My Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Discord are all in the description, and they are always for you guys to be notified of my next video or whenever I have an update for the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, as well as share this out with your friends and family. But until the next video, take care.